Welcome, story lovers, and gather round. Tonight, we journey to a place lost in time, a village named Raven Hollow, a quiet hamlet forever hemmed in by ancient, sunless forests. Every evening, as twilight bled from the sky, a thick, creeping mist would slither between the gnarled trees. Doors were bolted, windows shuttered, and the village held its breath before the first owl's mournful cry. It was an unspoken rule: no one, absolutely no one, dared to venture out after dark. Well, almost no one. There was Lena, a young woman with a spirit as untamed as the woods themselves. She found the village tales more amusing than alarming. Her grandmother, her face etched with the wisdom of years, would often warn her, her voice a low whisper, "The forest has eyes, child. And if you stare too long into the dark will stare back." But Lena would just laugh, a sound like wind chimes in the heavy silence. Stories to scare children, she'd dismiss, a smile playing on her lips. That was her world, a world of logic and light. At least, it was. Until the night of the black moon. The night everything changed. It began with a scream. A single, sharp cry that ripped through the profound silence of Raven Hollow like a blade. Villagers, hearts hammering against their ribs, spilled from their homes, their lamps casting frantic, dancing shadows. There, on the path bordering the woods, they found the scene of a tragedy. The woodcutter's son, Elias, was gone. His lantern lay shattered on the cobblestones, its flame still flickering defiantly, a tiny star in the oppressive dark. The only clue to his fate was a line of footprints, his own, leading directly into the ominous maw of the forest. But there was another set, footprints leading out. These were different, twisted, and natural. Twice as large as a man's, and terrifyingly, not human at all. From that night forward, the very air of Raven Hollow seemed to curdle with fear. The forest, once a silent neighbor, began to speak. Some folks, huddled by their hearths, swore they heard their own names being called from the depths of the trees, a chilling, intimate invitation. Others, peering through their curtains, saw shadows detaching themselves from the darkness, moving with a sinister purpose against the faint moonlight. The disappearances continued. Every few nights, another soul was swallowed by the woods, leaving behind only silence and a fresh wave of terror. A weaver, a baker, a child chasing a stray cat gone. Vanished without a trace. Lena couldn't just stand by, watching her home be hollowed out, her friends and neighbors picked off one by one. Her grief hardened into resolve. She packed a small, sturdy bag with a loaf of bread, a pouch of salt for protection, and a precious heirloom, her grandmother's old silver locket. Inside its polished case rested a tiny, gleaming mirror. As she stood at the edge of the village, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of blood and fire, she squared her shoulders. "If the forest wants to speak," she declared to the empty air, "then I'll listen." With a deep breath, she stepped onto the old wooden bridge that served as the threshold between her world and the unknown. The moment she crossed into the tree line, the air grew instantly colder, heavier, pressing down on her like a physical weight. The mist coiled around her ankles, thick and clammy. Even the light from her lantern seemed to bend and warp, as if the shadows themselves were alive, breathing, hungry. Hours crawled by. The familiar night sounds of the woods were absent. No crickets chirped, no birds sang their nocturnal songs. It was a silence that felt populated, alive. And then she heard it. A faint, insidious whisper, as close as a breath beside her ear. Lena. She froze, every muscle tensing. The sound was so close, so personal. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling but firm. Her only answer was the frantic, thudding echo of her own heartbeat. Deeper she walked, her lantern held high, a solitary beacon in an ocean of black. Then, through the dense fog, she saw a flicker of ethereal blue light, pulsing gently. Drawn by an instinct she couldn't explain, she followed it. The light led her to a small, circular clearing, dominated by an ancient, twisted tree. And beneath its sprawling branches stood a man. He was tall, wrapped in a long black cloak that seemed to drink the light, and his eyes glowed with a faint, silvery luminescence. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice soft, yet carrying an immense weight, like the rustle of 1,000-year-old leaves. Lena, refusing to show her fear, lifted her chin. "And yet, here I am," she retorted. "Who are you?" A sad, fleeting smile touched his lips. "A guardian, or perhaps a prisoner," he murmured, his gaze drifting toward the impenetrable darkness between the trees. "It depends who you ask." He raised a pale hand, pointing. "There are doors in this forest, Lena. Some open to dreams, and some open to nightmares." Lena's brow furrowed. "And which one took my friends?" The man's silver eyes met hers. "The one that listens," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The whispering door. Before she could press him for more, he took a single step back and, like smoke on the wind, simply vanished into the mist. Left alone with the stranger's cryptic words, Lena pushed onward, deeper into the forest's suffocating embrace. The whispers of her name grew more frequent now, guiding her, pulling her. At last, she stumbled into another clearing. In its center stood a colossal tree, so ancient it seemed to be a part of the earth itself. Its trunk was split down the middle, a gaping wound in the wood. And between its gnarled roots, a faint, sickly light glowed. It wasn't a fire, but a doorway. A doorway made of pure, shifting shadow. She felt an inexplicable pull, a magnetic force drawing her closer, as if invisible hands were tugging at her clothes, her soul. Then, from the depths of that shadowy portal, a voice spoke. A voice she knew. "Lena, I've been waiting." It was Elias, the woodcutter's son. Her heart leaped into her throat, a frantic, trapped bird. She held her lantern higher, its light trembling. "Elias, is that you? Help me," the voice pleaded, laced with a desperate urgency. "Just step inside. It's safe here." But as she took a hesitant step forward, something felt profoundly wrong. The shadow behind the voice moved a fraction of a second before the sound reached her, like a puppet whose strings were being pulled by a clumsy master. Her grandmother's words flashed in her mind, "The dark will stare back." Her hand, shaking, went to the silver locket around her neck. She fumbled with the clasp and opened it. The tiny mirror inside caught the lantern light, shimmering brightly. And in its reflection, she saw the horrifying truth. The Elias calling to her was not her friend. It was a monstrous creature made of smoke and shadow, its face a swirling vortex of stolen features, shifting and contorting like a reflection in disturbed water. A scream caught in her throat. She stumbled back, crying out, "You're not him." The forest itself seemed to recoil at her defiance. A terrible, collective howl rose from the trees. The branches bent inward, not from wind, but from a malevolent will. And within the dark, rough bark, dozens of faces began to form, faces of the lost, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes wide with eternal terror. They whispered, they pleaded, they laughed, a cacophony of stolen voices. In her panic, Lena dropped her lantern. But instead of extinguishing, the flame erupted. It didn't just burn, it blazed, filling the clearing with a purifying, golden fire. The shadows shrieked, twisting away from the holy light as if it were acid. The silver locket in her hand grew intensely hot, a searing brand against her skin. The whispers turned to screams of rage. "You cannot leave," but Lena was already running. She ran blindly, fueled by terror and adrenaline through grasping roots, clawing branches, and swirling mist until she burst from the tree line and collapsed onto the cold, solid ground of Raven Hollow. When she dared to look back, the forest was utterly silent. The oppressive mist, which had plagued the village for as long as anyone could remember, was beginning to thin, dissolving with the first tender rays of morning light. A few days later, her courage restored, Lena returned to the forest, but this time she was not alone. The village elders walked with her, their faces a mixture of awe and apprehension. They found the clearing, and the great, split tree. But the shadowy door was gone. Where it once had pulsed with dark energy, they found something else buried in the soft earth. Dozens of silver lockets, just like hers, tarnished by time. Each was engraved with a name. And among them, Nestled in the dirt was one that read Elias. With trembling hands, Lena placed her own locket beside his, a silent tribute. She whispered a prayer for the lost souls, and then she walked away, leaving the forest to its newfound peace. That night, for the first time in years, Lena stood by her window and saw the brilliant, glittering tapestry of stars above Raven Hollow. The sky was clear. The fear was gone. But just as she was about to close the shutters, a soft voice, gentle and familiar, drifted on the night wind. "Thank you, Lena. Courage, you see, is not the absence of fear. It is walking through the darkness, even when it knows your name, and choosing to be the light. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more tales from the shadows. Until next time, stay curious."